Alright everybody, it's been a little while since I've done a greenhouse update and things are going pretty good. It's an all breeders greenhouse now pretty much. I am using the water culture beds to grow some of the brassicas. I've already talked about those, so we won't spend a lot of time on that. We'll go back here and you can see it's becoming a jungle again. Very pleased with what's going on. So let's take it FAWN by FAWN. FAWN stands for flowing aerated wicking nutrient, and it's what I termed how I grow in here. It's a form of hydroponic drip system. I grow in aged rice hulls mixed with parboiled rice hulls to make it more aerated and lighter mix. Okay, so that's how I grow. I also use Masterblend nutrients, hydroponic nutrients mixed with calcium nitrate and Epsom salt. So the first platform here I call FAWN 1, and then FAWN 2, and so on all the way down. The first three platforms are three tier. It's not really tiers, but I've got 3 in a row. The next time when I build my new greenhouse, I'm going to put 2 instead of 3. This is a little bit crowded, a little bit too much for me. But using space-saving techniques that I've come to do pretty good with, it works out pretty good. Okay, so down to the meat of the video. On this row here, I've got Lacey. Lacey is a Heg Campari, German pink, beefsteak tomato crossed with a Campari 4th generation store-bought tomato. I bought a couple of years ago and saved the seed, maybe a little longer than 2 years ago, I'm not sure. Anyway, Lacey is the guy's name, Mr. Heg, and I crossed those two and I named this tomato after him. It's called Lacey. Now these are Big Bold. That is the tomato that I really like the taste of, and it's a cross of mine. I don't want to give out the parentage of it, at least not yet. Anyway, we'll just kind of point down here. I've got some potatoes growing from stem cuttings. Let me put my finger my finger outside that I look with, and what's in the camera are 2 different pointings. So let me look in the camera here. Okay, so that bucket right there has got the original stem cutting in it. I originally put 4 or 5 stem cuttings in it. 1 survived, and then as it got really tall, I bent it over and I put it in the other bucket there that was right next to it. It was at another location, but I moved it over here because I needed all this space over here to do my breeding lines. So that's what those 2 are. I'll do a potato reveal within a month. I got 2 different types of carrots over there, Dulciva and what was the other one? I can't remember. Doesn't really matter too much. Well, let me go just to let everybody know. Dulciva, and the tag is Scarlet Nantes. Okay. So we're over here. This line of tomatoes here in the center of FAWN 1 is Big Zack crossed with a super special cherry tomato of mine. I'm going to go in more detail about all of this very soon. The cherry is an absolutely amazing cherry, and I hope to impart some of the genetics of the cherry tomato in with 6 different lines, and this is the first line. It's the Big Zack, and that is the same, not the same tomato I'm giving seeds away from, but the same original seed Big Zack that I gave the seed away from, if that makes sense. Okay, here on this line, on this row here, I had squash like I do over here, but there was no, because they were growing together, there was no room to walk, so I moved them over, and I'll show you that in a minute. So this one doesn't have much, except for I've got some more Big Zacks growing from the very same seed that I'm giving away. These ones here, I wanted to see if it's consistent with seed I'm giving, or the parent. In other words, I really like the parent. Okay, down here I've got 2 peppers, one here and one directly opposite of it. It's got the front row seats to the sun coming in, and that's because peppers really like the sun. But these are the mariachi next generation from the plant that I picked, and I put in a couple videos. I think, yes, the topic of the video, creating your own pepper or something like that. That's the parent of these 2. And I've got some little flowers coming on, as you can see. Alright, this is coming back here on FAWN 2. This side is my squash. My squash is, I haven't named it yet, but it's a really, I love this squash. But I planted it on 11 July, and I think today is like the 14th. So from the date I actually planted it, which 11 July to now, we're talking 33 days. 33 days from the day it went in the ground. That is absolutely amazing that these are already setting fruit. That is the earliest I have ever heard of a summer squash developing to eat. Now, if you guys have heard of one that's earlier than this, let me know. But days to maturity doesn't start, as a consensus, people say days to maturity starts once the first leaves turn or grow after they pop through the soil. So that would mean if I planted them on 11 July, it takes 4 or 5 days to pop through the soil, another 3 to 5 days for the first leaf to appear. So you're looking at 7 to 10 days added to 11 July, which would make it, what, about the 18th or 19th of July. So we're looking at this thing producing fruit in under 30 days from the days to maturity. So if I get a squash off of that next couple of days, that would be pretty phenomenal. All of that lengthy conversation just to say that. I'm really pleased with this squash. Beautiful squash, great tasting. Okay, in the middle here we have got my super fantastic cherry crossed with big beef, and you can see that they are making little tomatoes on fertilizing the dickens out of this. Let me see here. Yeah, see little tomatoes all over this thing, and that's fantastic. Trying to get some tomatoes. Let me see if I can see another one. Yeah. Actually, all the lines except for the first one I showed you, Big Zack right there, they don't have tomatoes on it yet because they're not as far along. So, but I'll show you little tomatoes as we go. Now, next to it on this FAWN 2 is the other squash I planted that were 5 days behind it, and they're coming along nicely too. Some pretty, actually this one is also 11 July, and that one too, but the rest are 16 July. So anyway, yeah, those are coming along great too. I mean, they're really growing fast now. On this line of the third FAWN, we've got, I tentatively called it Christmas. Christmas F2. That is the vining, heavy vining squash breeding of mine, and I've got some popping up. The plant kind of keeled over before I could, before the seed squash was really mature enough, but I did manage to get at least 3 of the seeds to grow. More may pop through in the next few days. We'll see how that goes, but yeah, I'm trying to develop that line further. I call it Christmas, potentially maybe holiday. We'll see how it goes. But anyway, I really like the squash. It's a vining yellow, summer, great tasting. Okay, the next 2 areas of the FAWN, pretty congested, right? These are on the center here. This is, had to look, this is, what did I say those were? I said those were big beef. That's not true. These are Succeed my tomatoes succeed crossed with my cherry. These are the big beef. These are the big beef, and you can see you got little tomatoes on it as well. All the way down. Got some little tomatoes on. The one left side of the FAWN 3 is West Virginia sweetmeat, which is a bigger type pink tomato. It had a pretty good flavor if you like the pinks, and I think pinks are okay, but I prefer the reds and the darks. But there's a couple little tomatoes on there. They're going to be smaller. When you cross a beefsteak type tomato with a cherry tomato, you get, depending on how big the beefsteak is, you get basically another cherry, maybe a saladette that's just a little bit bigger than the cherry. You would think it would go halfway, wouldn't you? You know, half as big as between the cherry and the big beef, but it doesn't. It stays really a lot closer to the cherry size. So I'm interested to see how big those get, and that's why I crossed the cherry with all these bigger tomatoes, so I can get a cross that has the genetics of both the tomatoes and a bigger size tomato. Okay, so this is West Virginia sweetmeat. Going down here, couple cherry tomatoes down here. Still like popping them cherry tomatoes in my mouth. I love them things. Got some growing up there. You can see some color to them. Also had a couple other big beefs because I only managed to get 5 of the West Virginia sweetmeats here. So to sum up real quick, we've got Big Zack on FAWN 1, Succeed on FAWN 2, Big Beef and West Virginia sweetmeat on FAWN 3. Now the last 2 fawns, 4 and 5, 1, 2, 3, yeah, 4 and 5 here, they're single, and that's because they were initially made for heavier cropping items like single stem squash or single stem tomatoes. But this one, it's a mutant of chocolate stripes that had no stripes. It was a pretty color. I'm calling it amber flare. I'm going to grow out amber flare next year and see if it grows the same as the mutant. It should, but it might revert back to the stripes, the chocolate stripes. So, and on this one over here is chocolate stripes. So chocolate stripes and amber flare. Now these also have little tomatoes on them. I love them little tomatoes. This is a super fun time for me. Watching these things mature and watching my breedings come about, excuse me, basically just like I want them to, you know. And so yeah, these are all going to be, these 6 lines are all going to be a smaller tomato. There'll be some that'll be a little bit bigger than others, especially like the big beef is a hybrid. When you cross a hybrid with my cherry, which was at the F4 stage when I made these crosses, when you cross them and you still have an incomplete, it's not, the lines have not set, the genetics have not set. When you cross 2 hybrids like that, you get a form of, I think they call it a dihybrid cross, but anyway, they're not as consistent. So I may get some variations certainly from plant to plant, but I may also get a little bit of variation in size. But when you have a solid tomato like chocolate stripes here, and you cross it with an F4 generation, which is, I don't know, about 80% complete with this genetic makeup, you get a lot more consistent. So these are going to be more consistent. Small still. Now the next year when I grow out these seeds of all 6 lines, when I grow them out, that'll be what's called the F2 generation, filial 2, 2nd generation. The genetics are going to disassemble and recombine in ways that are the most diverse that is ever going to happen in these lines lifetime. It's going to be all over the place. You're going to get small tomatoes and big tomatoes. You're going to get all different kinds of colors and whatnot. For example, This one is chocolate stripes. It is a dark tomato, but it has it's mahogany, called mahogany color. It's a type of brown slash purple color mixed with green stripes. So some of this fruit will probably have some of that green stripes in it, which I'm hoping, because they look pretty. Excuse me again. But next year, when I grow out the next generation from these, you're going to have small tomatoes, and you're going to have really bigger tomatoes, and you're going to have some with stripes and some all different variations in color and all that. So the F2 generation is fun, and that's where the majority of the selections are made. The selections being what you want to carry forward to the F3, the next generation, to try to solidify. You know, you try to think of things like taste, appearance, which is called phenotype, and you try to think of how they grow. Do they grow tall and leggy, or are they more compact? Are they more compact like a semi-determinate? These are all indeterminate tomatoes, so they're not going to ever be a determinate. They're always going to continue to grow, but some of them, they grow just like as you see here. Some of them grow really tall, really fast, and some of them are squatty, or they grow slower, and some of them have tons of truss flowers, and some of them have just a few. So you're going to get a lot of diversity with these crosses. I'm really looking forward to it. So that's the greenhouse on, I think today's the 14th of August, and yep, it's looking good. I'm really enjoying it. I'll carry you down here for one last look of what's going on. No real issues really. I had on my potatoes I was telling you about over there, I had some aphids, knocked it out with my do-it-all juice, and I had a little bit of powdery mildew on the carrots. Believe it or not, that's the only place I've got a little bit of powdery mildew, and the do-it-all juice knocked out most of that too. I'll probably get rid of it on the next spray, which I'll do in a few days. But yeah, that's it everybody. It's Brent. We'll see you later.